sharpest, most capable people you know often seem to trust almost no one. The common explanation is that intelligence makes you cynical. That's not quite right, and the actual explanation is more useful than the myth. It's not that analytical people trust no one. It's that they trust very few people, very specifically. And there's real documented psychology behind exactly why analytical thinking narrows the circle instead of closing it. 4 real mechanisms explain this, and one honest caveat, because this same trait can misfire into something that isn't actually healthy. Let's start with the thinking style underneath all of it. Need for cognition. Psychologists John Cacioppo and Richard Petty identified a stable personality trait called need for cognition, the degree to which someone actually enjoys effortful thinking versus preferring quick, simple conclusions. People high in need for cognition don't take claims at face value by default. They tend to want to work through the reasoning themselves before accepting it. Trust, at its core, is accepting a claim or a person without being able to fully verify it. If your default mode is, let me actually think this through, granting that kind of unverified acceptance takes noticeably more evidence than it does for someone whose default is to accept the first plausible explanation. This isn't cynicism. It's the same trait, running on people the way it runs on information. 2. Dual process thinking. Daniel Kahneman's dual process research describes 2 modes of thinking: fast, automatic, intuitive judgment, and slower, effortful, analytical reasoning. Everyone uses both, but people who default more often to the slower, analytical mode tend to catch small inconsistencies that intuitive processing would simply smooth over. Here's the practical effect. 2 people can hear the exact same story from someone. One person's intuitive processing fills in the gaps and moves on. The other's analytical processing flags the gap itself, a detail that doesn't quite add up, a timeline that doesn't quite fit. That flagged inconsistency doesn't disappear. It becomes the seed of doubt. This is often mistaken for suspicion of the person. It's usually closer to noticing an inconsistency in the story, which is a different, more specific thing. 3. Cognitive reflection and resistance to persuasion. Psychologist Shane Frederick's cognitive reflection test measures the tendency to override a quick, intuitive but wrong answer in favor of working out the correct one. Higher scorers on this measure have been shown across multiple studies to be less susceptible to certain cognitive biases and less easily persuaded by misleading claims that rely on an intuitive shortcut being taken at face value. In plain terms, a chunk of what makes people vulnerable to being misled or manipulated is accepting the first plausible read on a situation. People who reliably pause and double-check that first read are simply harder to fool using tactics that rely on speed and surface plausibility, which is a lot of manipulation tactics as it happens. From the outside, being harder to fool looks a lot like being distrustful. It's really closer to being resistant to the specific tools that build unearned trust quickly. 4. Incremental erosion, not sudden betrayal. Most popular narratives about trust involve a single dramatic betrayal. Research on interpersonal trust, building on psychologist Julian Rotter's original interpersonal trust scale, suggests trust erosion is very often incremental instead. Small inconsistencies, noticed one at a time, that gradually lower the baseline. For someone who's naturally catching more of those small inconsistencies, per the last 2 mechanisms, the erosion simply happens faster and with less obvious cause. There often isn't one clear moment that explains the distrust, because it was never built on one clear violation. It was built on 20 small ones that most people wouldn't have consciously registered at all. This is why it can look, from the outside, like analytical people decided not to trust someone with no real reason. Usually there was a reason. It just accumulated instead of arriving all at once. The same alertness to inconsistency that produces genuinely well-calibrated trust can also misfire into something that isn't actually accurate, over-detecting patterns that aren't really there, or treating ordinary human inconsistency, which everyone has, trustworthy or not, as evidence of deception. This matters because calibrated trust and generalized distrust look similar from a distance, but function very differently. Calibrated trust means extending real trust to specific people based on real evidence and being genuinely open to updating it. Generalized distrust means the bar never actually gets crossed, no matter how much evidence accumulates, which isn't a sign of intelligence. It's a bias like any other, and it tends to correlate more with anxiety and past experiences of betrayal than with analytical thinking itself. The distinction worth checking in yourself: have you ever actually updated your trust in someone upward based on evidence? Or does the analytical scrutiny only ever move in one direction? If it's the second one, that's not discernment anymore. That's a different pattern wearing discernment's clothing. So the accurate version of intelligent people don't trust anybody is really this: a preference for effortful thinking, a tendency to catch inconsistencies others miss, real resistance to the shortcuts that build unearned trust quickly, and erosion that happens gradually instead of all at once. All of that adds up to trusting fewer people, more specifically, not trusting no one. And the useful part is that none of these four mechanisms are fixed traits you're stuck with. Need for cognition, analytical override, cognitive reflection, all of them are closer to skills than to a ceiling set by raw intelligence, which means calibrated trust is something you can actually build on purpose, regardless of where you started.